The Age of Exploration, voyages that redrew the map, stories of Magellan, Columbus, and other explorers who expanded the world's horizons. Introduction. A world before maps, before the world was mapped, before satellites, GPS, and international airports, people believed the Earth was smaller than it truly was. Many thought sea monsters lurked at the edge of the ocean. Others believed the Earth ended in waterfalls or great abysses. For centuries, the world remained mysterious. Uncharted. But in the 15th century, that began to change. This was the dawn of the Age of Exploration, a time when daring sailors left behind the familiar coasts of Europe to cross oceans they could barely imagine, in search of trade routes, lands, riches, and sometimes glory. This era would change geography, change history, and redraw the map of the world forever. Why exploration began? It started with a need. Europe, especially Western Europe, was hungry for spices, not just to flavour food, but to preserve it, heal illnesses, and display wealth. Pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves were worth their weight in gold. But the overland route to Asia, known as the Silk Road, had become dangerous and costly. By the late 1400s, the Byzantine Empire had fallen. Muslim empires now controlled key routes between Europe and the East. European powers began looking for new ways to reach Asia by sea. Portugal, the first great navigators. Portugal was the first to take exploration seriously. It was a small country, but with a powerful ambition and a long coastline. Prince Henry of Portugal, known as Henry the Navigator, never sailed far himself. But he funded voyages along the west coast of Africa. He established a school of navigation, improved maps, and developed better ships called caravels. His efforts encouraged sailors to round the southern tip of Africa. In 1488, Bartolomeu Dias did just that, reaching the Cape of Good Hope. 10 years later, in 1498, Vasco da Gama went further. He sailed all the way to India. His journey opened up a new sea route between Europe and Asia. Portugal now controlled the spice trade, but they wouldn't hold that monopoly for long. Christopher Columbus and the New World. In neighbouring Spain, another explorer was preparing for a different voyage. His name was Christopher Columbus. He believed he could reach Asia by sailing west across the Atlantic Ocean. Many doubted him. They believed the ocean was too wide, but Columbus convinced Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain to fund his journey. On August 3, 1492, Columbus set sail with 3 ships, the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. For weeks, they sailed into unknown waters. The crew grew nervous, but on October 12th, they sighted land. It was not Asia, but an island in the Bahamas. Columbus had discovered what Europeans would later call the New World. Though he never knew he had reached a new continent, his voyage would mark the beginning of centuries of European exploration and colonization in the Americas. The Columbian Exchange, Columbus's arrival, triggered what historians call the Columbian Exchange. It was not just about land, but an exchange of plants, animals, people, diseases, and cultures. Europeans brought horses, wheat, and disease to the Americas. In return, they took tomatoes, potatoes, corn, and tobacco back to Europe. This exchange reshaped both worlds forever. Magellan and the first voyage around the world. Next came one of the greatest voyages in human history. Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese navigator sailing under the Spanish flag, sought to reach the Spice Islands by sailing west around the tip of South America. In 1519, Magellan set out with 5 ships and about 270 men. They sailed past Brazil and through a dangerous strait at the tip of South America. Today, that passage is called the Strait of Magellan. They crossed the vast Pacific Ocean, a name Magellan gave it, meaning peaceful sea. But the journey was anything but peaceful. They endured starvation, scurvy, and mutiny. Eventually, they reached the Philippines. There, in 1521, Magellan was killed in a battle, but one ship, the Victoria, continued on. Commanded by one Sebastián Elcano, it sailed westward, around Africa, and returned to Spain in 1522. Only 18 of the original 270 men survived. They had circled the entire globe. For the first time, humans had sailed around the earth. The Treaty of Tordesillas. Dividing the world as Spain and Portugal expanded their claims, conflict arose. To prevent war, the Pope stepped in. In 1494, Spain and Portugal signed the Treaty of Tordesillas. It drew an imaginary line down the Atlantic Ocean. Lands to the west went to Spain, lands to the east went to Portugal. Unknowingly, This gave Portugal control of what would become Brazil, and Spain control of much of the Americas. This treaty shaped the language and culture of the Western Hemisphere. That is why Brazilians speak Portuguese today. England, France, and the Northwest Passage, other European nations, soon joined the race. England and France began sending explorers to find a Northwest Passage, a sea route through North America to Asia. It didn't exist, but their search led to the exploration and later colonization of Canada and the eastern US. English explorer John Cabot reached Newfoundland in 1497. French explorer Jacques Cartier sailed up the St. Lawrence River in the 1530s, and in the early 1600s, Samuel de Champlain founded Quebec. The Dutch, too, joined the age of exploration. Henry Hudson sailed for the Netherlands and explored what is now New York, once called New Amsterdam. He sought a passage through the Arctic. Instead, he vanished in the icy waters that now bear his name, Hudson Bay. Impact on indigenous peoples. While these voyages expanded the world for Europe, they brought devastation for indigenous peoples. Diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza carried by Europeans wiped out millions. Entire civilizations like the Aztecs and Incas were conquered. Languages and cultures were lost. The age of exploration came with glory, but also great tragedy. The spread of Christianity and missionary work, along with trade and conquest, Europeans brought religion. Missionaries travelled with explorers seeking to convert indigenous peoples to Christianity. Churches were built in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Catholic and Protestant faiths spread worldwide. In some cases, this led to harmony. In others, to conflict. New maps, new knowledge. The discoveries of the 15th and 16th centuries changed how people saw the world. Maps became more accurate. Old myths were replaced by new knowledge. Sailors learned to navigate using stars, compasses, and astrolabes. They mapped coastlines, studied currents, and explored unknown lands. The globe, once mysterious, began to take shape. The commercial revolution, with new trade routes, came new wealth. Spices, silver, gold, sugar, and slaves were transported across oceans. Europe's economy transformed. Banks grew. Trading companies formed, like the Dutch East India Company and the British East India Company. Colonies were established around the globe. The seeds of globalization were planted. The human cost. But there was a cost. The transatlantic slave trade, which followed soon after, forced millions of Africans into slavery. They were taken from their homes, packed into ships, and sold into brutal labor. Their suffering is one of the darkest chapters in history, and it too began during this age of discovery. Legacy of the Age of Exploration. The Age of Exploration ended by the early 1700s, but its effects echo to this day. It connected continents, for better or worse. It brought different peoples into contact, sometimes peacefully, often violently. It created the modern world. The foods we eat, the languages we speak, the borders we know, all bear traces of that age. Conclusion. The Age of Exploration was a time of courage, greed, vision, and loss. It was an age of heroes and villains, of adventurers and empires. Men like Columbus, Magellan, da Gama, and Hudson changed the course of history. They redrew the map of the world, not with pencils, but with sails and stars. Thank you for listening to this long and calm story of exploration. Let it remind you how curiosity can lead to great discovery, and how great power must always walk hand in hand with great responsibility.